Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I'm glad to have you. If you're returning, welcome back. Today I thought we could talk about some education things that we need to be sharing as nurses and any healthcare workers really, but mostly this is going to be for nurses and mostly from a home care, hospice care standpoint. If you like what you see when you're watching here, I ask that you like, subscribe, and follow, please. So let's talk about it. I have been seeing a lot on different topics on the internet when I'm scrolling myself. I recently saw something about oxygen, and this brought to mind all the times that I could have provided better education for my patients regarding oxygen usage. You know, oftentimes as a nurse, when you do something day in and day out, you'll think to yourself, they probably know this. This is common sense. But let's just assume when we walk into a patient's house for the first time that they are at 0% in their learning ability of medical knowledge. And that isn't to say that we shouldn't talk to them with respect or talk down to them or any of those things, just that we should be always bringing up those educational points when we're meeting a patient for the first time and ongoing, just to reiterate it throughout their care. I had a patient once who had been using oxygen and had been my patient for some time. Not very old in the grand scheme of things compared to some of my other patients. I walked up one day and the patient was smoking a cigarette while using oxygen connected to an oxygen tank, of all things. And that's when it hit me that I had never properly had a conversation with this particular patient. Did this patient know that they shouldn't be smoking with oxygen? I would guarantee that that would be a yes. Before I go any further, I would just like to say that anything that I say on my channel is strictly my opinion and based upon my experiences as a nurse. I'm not a doctor, and if you are listening to me, I just ask that you take what resonates with you and leave what doesn't, as the psychics say. I'm not psychic either. So one thing that I had to do was explain to this patient that you can't smoke with oxygen on. Oxygen itself is not flammable, but it can be a helper to fire. So it can make it spread faster and hotter and all kinds of things. And when you're using oxygen, it gets on your clothes, it gets on your skin, and it can cause fire to be there, because fire likes oxygen. So it isn't that oxygen's flammable necessarily, but we don't want to have it near flammable things. So the things that we need to be teaching our patients is no petroleum products. That means we shouldn't be putting lotions, ointments, creams on our patients that have a petroleum base. Anything that says it's flammable on the bottle, don't put it on your patients. And that includes chapstick. Chapstick has petroleum in it. You really need to be reading the labels of what you're giving to your patients and what you're applying. They can use Burt's Bees. I've had patients ask, well, what can I put on mom's lips when her lips get dry? Because you know, when you're using oxygen, it can tend to dry out your nose, even with humidifier going, and it can dry out your mouth if you're a mouth breather. So Burt's Bees is a wonderful alternative. I'm sure there's other alternatives, but that's just one that I specifically found when I was doing research about it. It's beeswax. It's okay to use with oxygen from what I've read. And another thing is you can't be putting Vaseline in the nose. Don't put Vaseline in the nostrils. This is petroleum based. Don't put Aquaphor on your patients. This is petroleum based. What you need to do is use a water-based lubricant, like KY. Like KY. That works. You can moisturize the nose with a water-based lubricant, and it's not flammable. You can also use this on the lips. If you don't have Burt's Bees handy, you can use like a water-based lubricant on the lips for moisturizing too. Also, I believe our artificial salivas in healthcare settings are generally water-based as well. So just thinking of those things, keeping those things in mind. You don't want to be near open flames within 10 feet. So no cooking while we're wearing oxygen. No cooking food at the gas stove, no sitting at the fireplace enjoying the fire, because if something sparks, it may ruin your beautiful evening. So it's just important that we're teaching our patients these things and not assuming that they know these things. Another thing that's really important to teach patients in a home setting is medication dosage and medication usage. In a hospice setting, we are using medications like morphine, and morphine comes in a liquid form for patients that are on hospice, and it is concentrated. It's 20 milligrams to 1 milliliter. And those milligrams and milliliters can get tricky to people when they're reading instructions. So even though our medications come with instructions, we want to always make sure that we are demonstrating, teaching, talking through, explaining things to our patient, and you can leave written instructions in your patient's house as well. If they learn well by reading, write it out, talk to them. When I was doing admissions, sometimes I would come to a house and of course the medications wouldn't be there yet. Here's a misconception that people think of when they think of hospice. The medications don't come to the house with us. We do not carry medications on our person. We do not transport medications generally in most companies. We're not transporting those types of medications for obvious reasons, for ethical reasons, for all kinds of reasons. We do not have our hands on the medication until it's in your hands and in your home. So I started carrying little oral syringes with me that were 1 milliliter, which is what we use in a morphine concentrate liquid, is the 1 milliliter oral syringe. And I would demonstrate this to the families. I would draw it back to 0.25 milliliters and explain to them that this was 5 milligrams. But when you're writing instructions to your patients, you don't want to include that 5 milligram in your instructions, because that can get tricky, that can get confusing. You want to write that 0.25 milliliters. When you're educating about the dosage that you're using, you want to use it in simple terms and you want it to not be confusing. So don't keep adding information in when you're teaching your patients. Make it simple and make it understandable, and use the amount of words that you need to use to get the point across. Don't add extra stuff in, because when you start adding extra stuff, it starts crisscrossing and getting confusing, and then people make mistakes. They make medication errors. So it's very important that we're teaching our patients how to use their medications, what they're indicated for, leaving written instructions, and not only doing it one time at that initial visit or at that second visit, that we're reiterating these safety precautions and these medication instructions throughout our care with the patient, so that when it becomes 2 o'clock in the morning and the patient needs these things, and the family is going to call triage likely, when triage gives them the walkthrough, they're going to have something in their mind that just clicks and remembers all the things. It's going to align with the things that you've been teaching the patient, and that is where education is so critical. And again, it is important to, when you're meeting with a patient for the first time, you need to assume that they are at zero with their medical understanding, because even people working in the healthcare field are not always aware of the types of medications that are used for hospice patients in death and dying, for comfort medications. They're not always aware of those things. For example, if I walked into an ICU, I would not be instructing a nurse. I would need a nurse to instruct me on the medications that I was being given, because I don't work in an ICU and I'm not familiar with those medications. That's not to say that as nurses we're not familiar with those words, or in healthcare workers we're not familiar with those words, but when it becomes your family member or yourself that is getting that care, it's a whole different world. And it is important as nurses for us to provide that education and for us to be aware of what is safe and what is not safe. Again, education doesn't just extend to our patients. Also, when we're getting students, when we're getting new nurses that we're onboarding and that we're training, we need to be making sure that our new nurses are aware of this. Fresh out of nursing school, you haven't given a ton of these medicines. You haven't done a ton of these procedures. You just had a bunch of information slammed into your brain in nursing school, and now here you go. You're out in the world to do your job. So give them a little grace, give them a little slack, and give them a lot of education. And if they have questions, answer those questions. It's important when a nurse is new and they're drawing up a medication that you are double checking it and triple checking it with them. Remember when you were in nursing school and your instructor had to approve the amount of medication you did before you injected it into somebody's IV or before you gave a pill? You had to know what it was for. You had to verify that the dose was correct 3 times, because those are the things that we are doing within ourselves every time. I am looking at the screen, looking at the medication, looking at the screen, looking at the medication. We need to be empowering our family members to do these things, and we need to empower our new nurses that are coming into the workforce. We need to empower them to do the correct things too. That 5 milligrams and that mill can get confusing and tricky, especially when you're doing something for the first time. So always, always, always assume that people are coming in with a zero level of knowledge. And again, you're going to teach them respectfully in words that they can understand, and we're not going to talk down to people, because we're not saying that people are unintelligent. We're not saying that people are incapable of understanding these things. What we're saying is people haven't dealt with these things before, and we need to assume that they need us to give them that information. And that is what we're there for. As nurses, we are there to provide that care and to provide that education. And I'm really big on that. But when I think about this, about how many people don't know that you can't use lip balm or certain lotions with oxygen, I think of the time that I assumed that my patient knew they shouldn't be smoking with oxygen on. I'm going to say I'm pretty sure that that patient knew they shouldn't be smoking with oxygen on, but after that, ever since then, I have always said to my patient, let's talk about oxygen safety. Let's make sure that we are not using anything petroleum-based or flammable on our bodies. No open flames or sparks within 10 feet of the oxygen. We're not going to be doing any cooking or sitting by the fire while we have oxygen on. Those sorts of things. Another thing that you want to teach them is how to turn on the machine, and safety with the machine, safety with tanks, those sorts of things. The oxygen equipment gets delivered to the home, and sometimes you have a really good delivery person who will set it up and give you a little quick and dirty. They'll give you a little quick and dirty on how to turn on the machine and all those things. Concentrators have to be kept away from the wall. They have to be kept away from curtains. They have to breathe. I tell people, you can put it in your bathroom if it's too loud and it's going to get your room hot. A bathroom is a pretty open space. You can kind of put it in the middle. A lot of patients put it in the bathroom and run the cord under the door, the oxygen tubing, because it's so loud, a concentrator a lot of times. I don't know, I suppose they have quiet ones, but I haven't seen any. You want to make sure that families know not to have the oxygen concentrator up against the wall, up against curtains, so that it's got room to breathe, because they're going to call at 2 in the morning and tell you that the machine is beeping. You want to teach them how much water to put in the humidifier bottle. You want to teach them how to put the oxygen tubing in the nose, how to put the prongs. The prongs are down in the nose. You want to be teaching these things. You want to make sure that your patient is fully confident and the family is fully confident in using these devices and this equipment in their home. When it comes to tanks, you want to make sure that those tanks are in a rack or laying flat. This is what we need to be teaching our patients. We don't want any oxygen tanks to be to be doing any dangerous things, okay? We don't want that to happen. So we just need to be teaching our patients not only safety with oxygen use, but safety with the equipment that they're using and how to use that equipment. We need to teach them how to turn it on, how to turn it off, how to apply it to their loved one, all these things, when to use it. These are things that we are constantly doing and we should be taking credit for, but we also need to be thinking, I got to give this information every time I come. It becomes more condensed as you go, because your patient, your family member, like, I get it. No smoking with the oxygen. Some people never get it. Sometimes you catch those people smoking with the oxygen numerous times, and that is why there are these little devices that go on the oxygen tubing that prevent the fire from getting to the patient. It is It is necessary. There are people who are just not going to listen. But if you educated, you will feel confident that you gave the patient the information that they needed and that they were not without that information. When I saw that patient smoking, I realized I had never had that conversation with the patient. And I've seen patients using their oxygen concentrators by a fireplace or in the kitchen while there's someone cooking. Those are just really important things that you need to reiterate. And if you're teaching your patients and documenting that you're teaching your patients, if they continue to do those things, then you have proof that you've at least been educating them about it. Again, with the medications, you want to always be telling your families how to do it. You want to demonstrate it. You want to watch them do it, have them demonstrate it back to you. This is really important. This is really important in education for your families. And that's my take on things. Again, these are all my opinions, my experiences in nursing. So if you like what I talk about and you want to hear more and you're curious about it, I would love it if you like and subscribe and follow. And I would love it if you talk to me in the comments about any experiences you had with education, education blunders, times where you wish you did more, things that I could add to my education list that are so important. Let's talk about it. And I thank you for watching, and I hope to see you soon.